You people always cause trouble." The slur echoed through the hushed courtroom, dripping from the officer's smirk like acid. Spectators stiffened. The judge's gavel hovered midair. Yet the target of his contempt, a poised black woman in a navy suit, merely arched an eyebrow. She adjusted her glasses, stepped to the lectern, and let the tension coil tighter. Then, with deliberate grace, she produced a slim leather wallet, flipping it open to the Department of Justice seal. Gasps rippled like thunder. The officer's swagger evaporated, replaced by stunned silence as power reversed hands before everyone's widening eyes. In that instant, Sasha Henderson woke up in her small, comfortable townhouse on the outskirts of Easton City with a sense of numb anticipation. She'd had these fluttering nerves in her stomach for the past week, ever since she found out her request for a protective order was finally hitting the docket. For any average citizen, the looming presence of a legal challenge can be nerve-wracking. But Sasha was no average citizen. She was a discreet senior legal advisor within the Department of Justice, a role she had kept hidden from almost everyone in her hometown. The morning light slanted through her bedroom blinds, painting stripes of gold on her soft gray comforter. Sasha closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the events that led to this day. She had returned to Easton City only a few months ago, taking an extended leave from her duties at the DOJ. Officially, she'd come back to care for her ailing grandmother. Unofficially, she had grown tired of whisper networks and hidden truths. She came to confront personal matters that had haunted her, old injustices, unspoken pain, and a creeping sense that Easton needed more than backroom negotiations in Washington. It needed a reckoning. Yet Sasha believed in playing the game of modesty. People around her simply thought she was a diligent clerk working for a small law firm. They had no inkling of her powerful connections or the reason she'd become a lawyer in the first place. She looked around her bedroom, law books stacked on the desk, pictures of her father, once a celebrated civil rights attorney until an incident involving Easton police nearly ended his life, framed on the dresser. She drew strength from her father's memory, vowing she would use the law in ways he never fully got the chance to do. Shaking off the heaviness of early morning reflections, Sasha showered, dressed in her tailored navy suit, and braided her hair in a neat crown. She checked the time. She had an hour to make the drive across town, earlier than needed, yes, but she wanted to be at the courthouse before the usual wave of chaos. When Sasha arrived, the Easton County Courthouse steps were nearly empty, except for a lone protester pacing on the sidewalk with a handwritten sign that read, "We want justice." Sasha offered the protester a polite nod and walked up the limestone steps. No matter how many times she visited courthouses, either for small municipal matters or for high-stakes federal cases, she always felt a familiar knot in her stomach. Courthouses were the place where truth and lies tangled together, and sometimes justice still found its way through the maze of intimidation and bureaucracy. Inside, security officers manned the front gates. As Sasha placed her sleek black purse on the conveyor belt, an officer glanced at her ID. His lips parted slightly, as if he recognized her last name, but he made no comment. Sasha stepped through the metal detector, collected her purse and entered the echoing marble hallway that led to the courtrooms. It was the beginning of the day, and the hustle of attorneys, clerks, and anxious defendants swelled around her. Her footsteps tapped against the polished floors as she neared her designated courtroom. She passed people busily flipping through case files and making phone calls. Some wore suits more expensive than hers, others were obviously harried public defenders juggling a half-dozen urgent matters. But Sasha walked with the deliberate grace of someone who'd already navigated the most dangerous legal waters in the country. At the far end of the corridor, Sasha spotted Officer Mark Crenshaw. She'd never met him personally, but his reputation was well known in Easton, a brash cop unafraid to use tactics that stretched, if not outright violated, police protocol. He was an older white man with a build hardened by years on the force. His angular jaw clenched as he scanned the hallway with cold, narrowed eyes. The moment Sasha locked eyes with him, she felt a chill. He seemed to size her up, as if waiting for the perfect opportunity to assert his authority. Little did he know that Sasha wasn't just a local woman petitioning for a protective order. She was an instrument of justice, sharpened by the very top echelons of power at the DOJ. Crenshaw strode forward, his black boots resonating with each step. His police uniform and badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights. He paused a foot away from Sasha, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of leather from his belt and holster. His voice was gruff, laced with a condescending tone. "Are you lost, ma'am? This corridor is for official business." Sasha squared her shoulders and managed a polite smile. Her posture was as calm as a still pond. "I have official business here," she replied, voice steady. "Courtroom 2B. He let out a short chuckle. "You with a lawyer or something? Don't see many people like you wandering alone down here." His gaze slid from her face to her clothes, pausing to examine every detail, the mild scuff on her expensive heels, the pin on her lapel, the calm composure in her eyes. Sasha's politeness didn't waver. "I can manage on my own, officer." She tried to step around him, but he subtly shifted to block her path. A few heads turned. People noticed the silent standoff and lingered, uncertain whether to intervene. Sasha gave a measured sigh. She had come early specifically to avoid scenes like this. Her objective was to keep her identity under wraps until absolutely necessary. Any big confrontation could derail the entire reason she was here, to finalize the protective order that would shield her grandmother and younger cousin from harassment by a local street gang. And, ironically, Sasha also intended to gather more intel on a separate matter. Rumors indicated a certain local police element might be complicit in funneling information to that gang. "Let me give you a piece of advice," Crenshaw said, leaning in as though sharing a secret. "When you're in court, try not to stand out. Judges don't like grandstanding from folks who think they know more than they do." Sasha's expression remained placid. "Thank you for your advice." With that, she casually stepped around him and continued. His gaze followed her, a mixture of curiosity and vague irritation shining in his eyes. Sasha could feel the tension in the air. She was used to intimidation tactics, but rarely had she encountered them so openly in a mere courthouse hallway. Courtroom 2B looked like hundreds of other courtrooms Sasha had seen, rows of wooden benches, fluorescent lights overhead, polished floors that squeak if you didn't step carefully. The judge's bench loomed at the front, an imposing piece of mahogany with the state seal carved into its surface. Two flags, one for the United States, one for the state, stood in the corner, dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight that cut through high, narrow windows. Sasha took her seat near the front, quietly observing the preliminary hearings. She watched as a parade of cases went before the judge, minor offenses, traffic violations, and a few pretrial motions. Each time, the judge, a stern woman named Judge Patricia Barber, presided with crisp professionalism. Sasha had studied Barber's rulings during her father's time. Barber was known for her fierce commitment to the law, but also for giving officers the benefit of the doubt in borderline situations. Sasha wondered if that preference would impact her case. When the bailiff finally called her name, Sasha rose, heartbeat quickening. She walked to the podium, file in hand, aware of Crenshaw slipping into the room behind her. She felt his stare at her back, a tingle of hostility. Another officer was present too, someone Sasha didn't recognize, standing near the back wall. Judge Barber adjusted her glasses. "Miss Henderson, you're here to request a protective order?" The judge flipped through the pages. "Your file is in order. However, I see that the responding party has not appeared in court. Are you prepared to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," Sasha replied. "My grandmother, Martha Henderson, and my cousin, Tanya Henderson, have both been the targets of repeated threats. The respondents are members of the Riel Street crew. They've made direct threats specifically referencing me and my family after I tried to intervene in a community dispute." Judge Barber studied Sasha for a moment. "These are serious allegations." I see that you've included evidence of text messages and voicemails. Also, there's mention of potential evidence that local law enforcement was alerted. Officer Crenshaw, have you had any involvement in this case? She spotted him standing near the back of the courtroom, arms folded across his chest. Crenshaw stepped forward, clearing his throat. We did investigate the threats, Your Honor, but we found no conclusive ties linking the threats to the alleged gang members Miss Henderson named. He tossed Sasha a sidelong glance, faintly smug. We recommended she proceed legally if she believed there was cause. Sasha's jaw tightened. She had submitted the audio recordings and the transcripts to the local police station weeks ago. The words of the gang members were explicit. Yet hearing Crenshaw dismiss it so casually in court revealed more than just incompetence, it hinted at deliberate stonewalling. Judge Barber looked at Sasha. Well, Miss Henderson, it seems you'll have to rely primarily on the evidence you've presented personally. Let's proceed with your testimony. Sasha took a deep breath, then spoke clearly and methodically. She recounted the phone calls, the explicit threats referencing that uppity Henderson family, the menacing graffiti on her grandmother's fence. She explained how her father had once represented clients in a landmark civil case that forced the East PD to adopt new training procedures for racial profiling. That victory had made the Henderson name a point of contention among certain officers and criminals alike. She presented the text messages, their profanity-laced lines displayed as printed copies. The entire courtroom listened in hushed silence. Sasha spared a brief glance at Crenshaw, who watched her with hawk-like intensity. She couldn't tell if he was irritated or just waiting for a chance to discredit her. When she finished, Judge Barber nodded slowly. I find that the evidence is substantial enough for a temporary protective order to be issued. However, we'll need a hearing to finalize it. Miss Henderson, the formal hearing date will be set for next month. Until then, I'm granting a temporary restraining order. Relief washed over Sasha. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a major step toward protecting her family. She thanked the judge, gathered her documents, and turned to leave the podium. That was when she saw Crenshaw, arms still folded, waiting like a patient predator by the side door of the courtroom. The moment Sasha stepped into the hallway, he was there. Impressive performance in there, Crenshaw sneered. You must have some good connections. His tone dripped with sarcasm. Sasha faced him, her posture unwavering. I have the truth. That's usually enough. He took a step closer, once again invading her personal space. The corridor was quieter now, the main wave of morning cases finished. You think you're special just because you wave some evidence around? You think you can solve all your problems? Let me tell you something, the law is complicated, and judges around here don't like outsiders stirring up trouble. Sasha's lips curled in a slight smile, though her eyes remained stone cold. Officer Crenshaw, I'm hardly an outsider. I was born and raised in Easton. She paused, letting each word land with deliberate weight. And I know exactly how the law works. He snorted. You must be one of those fancy law types from out of town. Now maybe you learned a few tricks, but let's be real here, you're just another case file. We see folks like you every day, screaming about harassment. 9 times out of 10 they're lying or exaggerating, trying to get special treatment. Sasha let the insult pass without biting back. She had bigger plans for him. He just didn't realize it yet. I have more than enough evidence, officer. He took another step, lowering his voice so that only she could hear. You watch yourself. This might be a small city, but we've got big city problems. You start stirring the pot, you might not like what comes boiling out. Sasha's heart thudded, but her expression remained composed. She recognized a threat. The old Sasha might have exploded in anger or retreated in fear. But the Sasha who spent years in federal litigation, who sat across from senators and hammered out justice reform bills, was made of steel. She simply gave him a curt nod. Noted, she said softly, and walked away, leaving him standing there. Once out of Crenshaw's sight, Sasha slipped into an empty alcove near the stairwell. She pressed her back against the cool marble wall and took a moment to breathe. An old wave of memory hit her, sudden and painful. She was 13 years old again, standing beside her father outside this very courthouse. He had just lost a preliminary hearing in a discrimination case against the Easton PD. He had been so frustrated, so angry that justice seemed out of reach. Yet he hugged Sasha and told her, "Patience, baby girl. The law is slow, but it can be the most powerful weapon if you don't give up. Patience and persistence." Her father eventually won that case on appeal. The PD was forced to adopt new rules and pay damages to the families who'd been wronged. That victory was short-lived, though. Soon after, one of the officers involved in the suit assaulted him in a restaurant parking lot. Her father survived, but the beating made national headlines for a short while, leading to more scrutiny of the department. Sasha still carried the physical and emotional scars of that chaotic time. It was also the spark that propelled her to law school and then the Department of Justice, where she specialized in oversight of local police departments that violated civil rights. Yet Sasha had always yearned to keep her father's legacy separate from her own ascension in Washington. She didn't want pity or the burden of a family name overshadowing her genuine abilities. But now, in Easton again, everything converged: the memory of her father's battle with corrupt cops, the ongoing threats to her family, and this new face-off with Officer Crenshaw. Sasha composed herself and headed to the judge's clerk's office. She needed to confirm the next court date and possibly glean any insights on how Judge Barber might handle the final hearing. The clerk, an overworked young woman named Marcia, looked up from her computer screen with weary eyes. "May I help you?" Marcia asked, her tone polite but businesslike. Sasha smiled warmly. "I just wanted to double-check the date and ask if the judge typically requires any additional documentation for the final protective order." Marcia sighed, rubbed her temples, then scrolled through a digital calendar. "Your hearing is set for next month on the 12th, 9 a.m. As for documentation, the judge usually likes to see any supplementary evidence that became available after the initial request. Also, character statements can help if the respondent chooses to contest." Sasha nodded and handed over a business card, well, not her official DOJ card. She had a separate card listing only her name and a secure email. "If anything changes, please let me know immediately." Marcia took the card, glanced at it. "All right, Miss Henderson. I'll do that." Sasha turned to leave, then paused. Her instincts told her to ask, "By the way, do you happen to know how Officer Crenshaw is connected to these cases? It seemed like he was specifically called in to address questions about my petition." Marcia gave a slight shrug. "He's been around for years, has some ties to certain legal figures. The judge calls him in for input on local cases involving possible gang threats. Guess they figure he knows the local street scene well." Sasha thanked her. As she left the office, her mind began spinning a web of connections. If Crenshaw was a favored officer for the court's testimony, that might give him undue influence on the judge's decision. Sasha needed to be prepared. Later that afternoon, Sasha found herself driving to a small cafe across town, where she was scheduled to meet an old friend from high school, Cora Westfield, now a reporter for the East Tribune. Cora had always been the fearless truth seeker, printing edgy stories even in the school paper. Over the years, they'd kept in touch sporadically. If anyone in Easton had the scoop on local police corruption or ties to the Riel Street crew, Sasha guessed it would be Cora. The cafe was cozy, with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu boasting locally roasted coffee. Sasha arrived early, claiming a small corner table. While waiting, she sipped on a latte and gazed out the window at downtown Easton. Gentrification was on the rise, with new shops pushing out old businesses. Crime had shifted from some neighborhoods to others. It was a city in flux, uncertain of its identity. Cora breezed in, wearing jeans and a blouse, her press badge clipped to her shoulder bag. Sasha stood, and they embraced briefly. It felt good to see a familiar face, even under these tense circumstances. "How are you, Sasha? I heard you're back in town." "Sorry about your grandma's health issues," Cora said, genuine concern etched across her features. Sasha nodded. "She's hanging in. Thank you. I'm mostly worried about the threats right now." They settled at the table. Cora's eyes flickered with curiosity. "Yeah, I heard from someone at the courthouse that you filed for a protective order. Something about the Riel Street crew?" Sasha let out a slow breath. "That's the gist of it, but there's more. There's a cop, Officer Mark Crenshaw, who seems too interested in blocking my progress. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but my gut says he's tied up in something shady." Cora nodded, a glimmer in her eye. "I've heard whispers that he provides certain, let's say, helpful tips to some shady people in exchange for a cut of their dealings. But no one's ever proven it." Sasha's pulse quickened. "I need proof. If he's feeding information to gang members, that puts me and my family in even more danger." Cora leaned forward. "I've been working on a piece about possible corruption in the Easton PD for months. I've got sources, but they're all terrified of retaliation. If I can pin down real evidence, that's a big story, one that could lead to a major shakeup. But it has to be ironclad." Sasha thought of her father's old crusade, of how close he'd come to exposing the same patterns. She glanced around, ensuring no one was eavesdropping. "I have access to certain resources," she said carefully. She still didn't want to broadcast her DOJ role. "If I can gather enough to tie Crenshaw to illegal activities, would you be willing to go on record?" Cora nodded. "Absolutely. If you can protect my sources." Sasha sat back, her mind churning. She had to walk a delicate line here, building a case for a protective order while also gathering evidence that might implicate a police officer. The risk was enormous. But if she pulled it off, it could be a game-changer for Easton. They spent another hour sharing leads and brainstorming strategies before parting. Cora gripped Sasha's hand. "Be careful," she said. "Crenshaw isn't just some random bully. He knows how to silence people." Sasha's eyes hardened. "So do I. But using the law, that's what he'll never see coming." That evening, Sasha returned to her grandmother's house. It was a modest single-story home in a neighborhood once filled with working-class families. Now, abandoned houses dotted the block, and the streetlights were dim. Sasha's grandmother Martha was dozing on the couch, her crocheted blanket pulled up to her chin. Sasha gently checked her temperature and medications. Martha stirred, offered a weak smile, then fell back to sleep. Sasha settled into the old recliner in the corner of the living room. She set up her laptop on a folding tray and began her own investigation into Officer Crenshaw. Using her secure DOJ login through a VPN, she accessed publicly available records, cross-referencing them with internal bulletins to which she had limited clearance. She looked for patterns, unusual spikes in his reported arrests, suspicious drops in certain investigations, disciplinary reports that vanished from public record. It was slow-going, but Sasha was methodical. She found an internal complaint from an officer who had accused Crenshaw of tampering with evidence, unsubstantiated and later retracted. A second complaint indicated alleged favors for a known drug informant, again, no formal charges. Each instance was a dead end. But Sasha knew that combined, these red flags painted a troubling picture. Midway through her search, Sasha's phone buzzed with a message from a blocked number. She frowned, opened it, and saw. "You're digging where you shouldn't. Stop now or watch your family suffer." A cold shock ran through her. She reread the message. Was it from the gang? From someone within the police? Either way, it confirmed that her snooping hadn't gone unnoticed. Sasha closed her laptop and glanced at her sleeping grandmother. Resolve hardened in her chest. Threats wouldn't stop her. If anything, they fueled her determination. She deleted the message, made a mental note to forward it to a secure contact at the DOJ who specialized in digital forensics. If there was a way to trace it, Sasha wanted to know. The next morning, Sasha decided to run some errands for her grandmother. She drove to the local grocery store, Parkside Market, an old staple in Easton. As she strolled the aisles, she searched for the brand of herbal tea her grandmother loved. She was reaching for a box on a high shelf when she sensed someone step behind her. She turned to see Officer Crenshaw, arms crossed, wearing civilian clothes but still exuding that unmistakable cop aura. His eyes bored into hers. "Miss Henderson," he said with mock courtesy. "Fancy running into you here." Sasha willed her heart to remain steady. "Officer Crenshaw. Doing some shopping?" He shrugged. "I was in the neighborhood. Saw your car outside." He lowered his voice, leaning in. "I hear you've been asking questions about me. That's not wise." Sasha placed the tea in her cart, glancing around to see if any fellow shoppers were nearby. A middle-aged woman picking up cereal a couple of aisles away looked over but quickly returned to her shopping. Sasha narrowed her eyes at Crenshaw. "I haven't asked about you specifically," she lied coolly. "But I am investigating why the threats against my family weren't taken seriously." He gave a tight, humorless smile. "Let me give you a warning, you're stirring up trouble. Easton has its own way of dealing with troublemakers." Sasha held his gaze. "Threatening me in a public place isn't the best move, officer." Her voice rose slightly, loud enough for the cereal aisle woman to hear. She turned her head to the side. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, letting bystanders know something was amiss. Crenshaw's expression flickered with annoyance. He took a step back, raising his hands in mock surrender. "No problem at all. Just having a friendly chat." His gaze lingered on Sasha, then he walked away, disappearing around the corner toward the produce section. Sasha let out a slow breath. She hated letting him get under her skin. But that was exactly why she had to press forward. Whatever he was hiding, she was closer to exposing it than he was comfortable with. 3 days later, Sasha learned through a private channel that one of the Riel Street crew members, a young man named Troy T.J. Jackson, might be willing to talk. He was apparently disillusioned with the crew's leadership, especially after they started targeting more local families. And rumor had it, they were cooperating with certain cops for drug trafficking routes. The plan was to meet him at a rundown community basketball court on the east side of town, after dark. Sasha was no stranger to risky meetings. During her DOJ tenure, she had debriefed numerous confidential informants. Still, this was different. This was her hometown, and she was personally invested. She parked her car a block away under a broken streetlight, carefully scanning the area. The basketball court was surrounded by a chain-link fence. Under flickering lights, she saw TJ waiting near the bench. Wearing a hoodie, TJ looked barely out of his teens, his face a mixture of defiance and fear. Sasha approached cautiously, hands visible. "TJ," she called softly. He jerked his head around. "Yeah? You the lady asking questions?" Sasha nodded. "I just need some information. You said you know about connections between the Riel crew and..." He cut her off with a raised hand. "Shoo, look, I'm not saying names. That's how you get yourself killed. But I can tell you this, we got a cop who warns us when the big busts are coming. In exchange, we pay him. He keeps an eye on people who cause trouble for the crew." Sasha's chest tightened. "People like me?" TJ nodded slowly, casting a nervous glance around. "Yeah. You. Your family. A couple others." She swallowed, anger simmering. Is that cop Officer Crenshaw? TJ looked at her, conflict roiling in his eyes. I said I ain't saying names, but yeah, that's him. He spoke in a rush, as if purging a secret. He told the crew about your protective order. Said it would be easy to make you back off if we put enough pressure on you. Sasha's fists clenched. This was the confirmation she needed. Why tell me all this? TJ shrugged, looked down. I got a baby sister. She's only 9. I'm done with this life. I want out. Riel crew used to say they protected the hood, but they're just as bad as the cops they bribe. I heard you was once from around here. Figured you might be able to do something. Sasha nodded, her voice firm. I will. You have my word. But be careful, TJ. They'll know it was you. He nodded, stepping back into the shadows. I got a place to hide. Good luck, Miss Henderson. He dashed off, leaving Sasha alone under the sputtering streetlight. The clouds overhead obscured the moon, as if the night itself was cloaking them in secrecy. Sasha stood there, adrenaline coursing through her. She had just learned that Officer Crenshaw was actively feeding the gang information. This was bigger than a protective order now. It was a massive corruption scandal. She needed to compile evidence meticulously if she wanted to see real justice. That very night, Sasha used her DOJ contact to secure a private digital recorder and voice analysis software. She also set up an official meeting with her direct supervisor in Washington over a secure video line. Her supervisor, Deputy Assistant Attorney General Linda Corbett, was a stern woman with sharp cheekbones and sharper intellect. Sasha had worked under her for the last 3 years. I understand your situation is complicated, Corbett said, her voice echoing through Sasha's laptop speakers, but we must tread carefully. Local police corruption is a sensitive matter, politically and legally. Sasha nodded. I have a potential witness. Some partial evidence. We're talking about a cop funneling information to a street gang. This isn't just a bad apple, it's endangering lives. Corbett's brow furrowed. I'll allocate some resources for a preliminary inquiry. However, we can't launch a full federal investigation without more substantial proof. Do you believe you can get a recorded confession or corroborating evidence? Sasha exhaled. It might be possible. There's a chance I can corner Crenshaw. He's already threatened me multiple times. If I wire myself and push him, maybe I can get him to reveal something. Corbett's expression grew grave. That's extremely dangerous, Sasha. You're not just an attorney, you're not a trained undercover agent. Sasha gazed at her father's photo on the desk, then back at the screen. I know, ma'am. But this is personal and professional. I have to do it. After a long pause, Corbett nodded reluctantly. All right. I'll have a federal marshal on standby in Easton if things escalate. But proceed with extreme caution was the word on Sasha's mind as she ended the call, feeling the heavy weight of responsibility settle firmly on her shoulders. The rest of the night was spent meticulously devising a plan to confront Crenshaw. Every incriminating statement, whether a confession or a hint at his dealings, had to be recorded carefully. If Sasha could capture that, she would bring it directly to Corbett and possibly to Attorney General Merrick Garland, should the case prove explosive enough. The next day, Sasha took her place in her car outside the Eastern Police Department. Cora's sources had tipped her off that Crenshaw worked the evening shift that week. Around 4 p.m., she saw him exit the station and head toward an unmarked car. She started her engine, following at a discreet distance as he drove through downtown, eventually stopping at a rundown diner near the city limits. Sasha parked across the street, ducking low in her seat, watching as Crenshaw entered the diner. A minute later, another man in a black hoodie slipped inside. Recognition surged through Sasha. This was a known Riel crew lieutenant from the case files she'd studied. Her hand trembled slightly as she gripped her phone, snapping pictures. Crenshaw and the hooded man met in a corner booth, heads bowed in conversation. A waitress refilled their coffee cups, oblivious to the tension between them. Sasha clicked photo after photo, capturing what appeared to be an envelope exchange. This was happening in broad daylight, in a public diner. The brazen nature of it stunned her but also confirmed how untouchable they felt. After about 20 minutes, Crenshaw patted the man's shoulder and left. Sasha quickly started her car and waited for Crenshaw to drive off. When he was gone, she debated approaching the hooded man herself but decided it was too risky. She already had enough circumstantial evidence to bolster her case: pictures of a known gang member meeting with Crenshaw, her conversation with TJ, and the repeated threats. The following afternoon, Sasha put the final pieces of her plan into motion. She called Crenshaw using the number from the official court documents. After 3 rings, he answered curtly, "This is Officer Crenshaw." "Officer, it's Sasha Henderson," she said, forcing a slight tremble in her voice to sound intimidated. I'd like to speak with you privately about the protective order matters. I'd rather settle things before the final hearing." A pause, then Crenshaw's voice turned mocking. "Really? You've been giving me the runaround in court and now want to settle? I realize I might have been mistaken." Sasha lied, "Maybe we can come to some arrangement. I just don't want any trouble." Another pause. "Where and when?" She named a small park on the outskirts near the river, a quiet spot with minimal foot traffic on weekdays. "Tonight. 8 p.m. By the old fountain," she said. Crenshaw agreed, then hung up abruptly. Sasha stared at her phone, heart pounding. That was it. No turning back. She would carry the hidden recorder and, if all went according to plan, Crenshaw would incriminate himself. If it went wrong, she didn't want to finish that thought. Nightfall found Sasha standing by the chipped stone fountain at deserted Riverside Park. The summer air was muggy, clinging to her skin, and the dim streetlights barely reached beyond the empty parking lot. She wore a light jacket over her blouse to conceal the digital recorder pinned inside. At exactly 8 p.m., headlights appeared. A single car pulled in. Crenshaw stepped out, scanning the area. His silhouette was imposing under the faint light. Sasha stood her ground, exuding as much calm as she could muster. Sasha said, "You came alone?" Crenshaw asked, his voice echoing slightly in the stillness. Sasha nodded, raising her empty hands. "Just me." He walked closer, stopping a few feet away. "So," he drawled. "You want to settle things? Going to drop the protective order?" Sasha forced a nervous chuckle. "Look, I know you have certain connections in Easton. I don't want my family harmed. I'm willing to compromise." Crenshaw regarded her, suspicion in his eyes. "You sure changed your tune fast. Last time we talked, you were all about justice and evidence." He stepped closer, well into the radius of the tiny microphone hidden in Sasha's lapel. "What do you really want from me?" Sasha took a breath. "I want you to stop feeding information to the Riel crew about me and my family. If you do, I'll stay out of your business." The tension crackled in the air. For a moment, Sasha thought Crenshaw might lash out physically, but instead, he let out a low, humorless laugh. "You think it's that simple, girl? This town runs on deals. Who do you think your fancy lawyers in Washington are going to believe? A small-town cop with a clean record or some woman claiming I'm in bed with gang members?" Sasha's pulse raced. She was getting him to talk. He was on the verge of incriminating himself. "I've seen you meeting with them," she pressed. "I have pictures, witnesses." His face hardened. "Pictures of what? Sharing a cup of coffee at a diner? That's nothing. And your witness is probably a punk with a rap sheet." He took another step, and Sasha braced herself. "Listen carefully. If you drop the protective order, maybe the crew will forget about you. If not, well, accidents happen in this town, especially to meddling women. Sasha's jaw clenched and she forced out a shaky breath. So you admit you're working with them? Crenshaw glared at her, then sneered. Yeah, I admit it. I take a little extra on the side. You have no idea how much the city underpays us. The Riel crew and I have an understanding, they keep the real violence down, and I keep them updated if any major raids are coming. Nobody gets hurt unless they cross a line, like your family did, poking around. Sasha swallowed, her heart thundering. She had it. He had just confessed on tape. A swirl of anger and triumph filled her, but she had to get out safely or that confession would never see the light of day. She mustered her courage. Thank you for being honest, she said, her voice trembling, not from fear alone, but from the rush of adrenaline. Now, let me be honest with you, that conversation we just had, I recorded it. He blinked in surprise, rage twisting his features. You what? Sasha took a step back, trying to keep distance. I'm with the Department of Justice. You just confessed to conspiracy and corruption on a federal level. This ends now. The words landed like a thunderclap. Crenshaw's eyes darted wildly, and Sasha saw him reach for his side, a gun, she couldn't be sure. She took another step back, every muscle tensed. But before Crenshaw could draw, the sound of screeching tires split the night. A black SUV roared into the parking lot, headlights blinding them both. Out leaped two men in suits, weapons drawn. Federal agents. Freeze, one of them shouted. Crenshaw hesitated for half a heartbeat, then lunged as if to run, only to be tackled by the second agent. The scuffle was brief and vicious. Crenshaw managed a punch, but the agent subdued him, twisting his arms behind his back. Sasha stood rooted to the spot, breathing hard as Crenshaw screamed profanities at her. She watched him. Forcibly pinned to the ground, the harsh crunch of gravel under their bodies echoing through the park, one of the agents looked up at Sasha, nodded, and said, Miss Henderson, we were instructed to intervene if your safety was at risk. Deputy Assistant Attorney General Corbett sent us. Sasha could only nod, adrenaline still roaring in her veins. Crenshaw fought wildly against his restraints, spitting curses, but it was too late. The hidden recorder in Sasha's jacket had captured everything, enough to destroy him and to begin unraveling the network of corruption. The next morning, Sasha was back at the Easton County Courthouse but under drastically different circumstances. This time she was not just a private citizen seeking a protective order, she was there as a representative of the Department of Justice, flanked by two federal agents. Word spread through the corridors like wildfire. Officer Mark Crenshaw had been arrested on federal charges of corruption and conspiracy. His booking photo was already circulating among courthouse staff. Whispers echoed in every hallway. Judge Barber, upon hearing the news, called a special session. The gallery was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and local officials. Sasha sat at the prosecution's table alongside an assistant U.S. attorney who had flown in overnight from the regional DOJ office to file charges against Crenshaw. When Crenshaw was led into the courtroom wearing a wrinkled suit and handcuffed, the hush fell like a storm cloud. His once confident swagger was replaced by a simmering fury. He avoided Sasha's gaze, but she could feel the hatred emanating from him. As the formal charges were read, extortion, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, Sasha felt a surge of validation. She thought of her father, of the nightmares that plagued her family for years. She looked over at her grandmother and cousin sitting in the audience, tears shining in their eyes. This moment was bigger than Sasha's personal quest. It was a statement to the city of Easton: corruption within the police force was real, and it could be taken down. The hearing was brief, just enough to set bail conditions, which the judge swiftly denied, citing Crenshaw's risk of flight and potential to threaten witnesses. Cameras flashed, capturing his enraged face as he was led away. Sasha barely heard the swirl of chatter from the crowd. She was lost in the gravity of the moment. Outside the courtroom, Sasha was swarmed by reporters. She recognized Cora's voice among them. Sasha, Sasha. Is it true you work for the Department of Justice? How long have you been investigating Officer Crenshaw? Sasha took a small breath, ignoring the sea of microphones thrust near her face. I'm a senior legal advisor with the DOJ, she confirmed. Due to personal threats against my family, I came to Easton under the guise of private business. During that time, I discovered sufficient evidence of corruption involving Officer Crenshaw and the Riel Street crew. I can't comment further on an ongoing federal investigation. With that, she hurried away, feeling both relieved and strangely exposed. Her cover was blown, but it no longer mattered. Her mission was accomplished. As she entered the hallway leading to a private conference room, she was approached by Judge Barber. The judge's stern face was tinged with regret. Miss Henderson, she said, voice subdued, I had no idea. I wish I'd looked deeper into your case. You have my apologies if my courtroom gave you the impression that justice wouldn't be served. Sasha smiled politely. I appreciate that, Your Honor. Thank you. Then, to Sasha's surprise, the local police chief, Martin Blake, approached. Blake was a tall, solid man with graying temples. He cleared his throat awkwardly. Miss Henderson, I want to personally apologize for the department's failure to protect your family and for Officer Crenshaw's misconduct. We will cooperate fully with the federal investigation. Sasha studied him, detecting earnestness in his eyes. Perhaps this scandal would finally push Easton PD to reform. I hope so, Chief Blake. We can't undo the harm, but we can move forward with transparency and accountability. Blake nodded, promising to keep Sasha informed of any internal disciplinary actions and to assist with the broader investigation if needed. By the time Sasha left the courthouse, dusk was settling over Easton. The city skyline glowed under a purple-orange horizon. She stepped out onto the wide courthouse steps, gazing at the stately pillars and the swirling throng of people below. Reporters, families, citizens, some shook hands, others argued, but all were buzzing with the knowledge that a corrupt officer had finally been brought down. Across the street, Sasha spotted her grandmother and cousin waiting by a car. She hurried over, a wave of relief washing through her at seeing them safe. Her grandmother, frail but resolute, embraced Sasha tightly. You did it, Martha whispered, tears in her eyes. Your father would be so proud. Sasha's own tears brimmed as she nodded, hugging her grandmother close. It's not over, but we took a big step. Tanya, Sasha's younger cousin, gave her a playful punch on the shoulder. You're like some superhero out here. I had no clue you were DOJ. Sasha laughed softly. Superheroes don't exist, but we do what we can, and we do it together as a family. That evening, Sasha spent time with her loved ones, sharing a home-cooked meal. There were many unknowns ahead: the trial, the possibility of retaliation from other corrupted officers or the Riel crew. But for the moment, Sasha allowed herself the small satisfaction of having brought the truth to light. Over the following weeks, a DOJ task force descended upon Easton to expand the investigation. Subpoenas were issued. Crenshaw's financial records were combed through, revealing suspicious deposits and property acquisitions. Additional officers came under scrutiny. The Riel Street crew's leadership went on the run, but the FBI quickly nabbed 2 high-ranking members. National media outlets picked up the story. Small city rocked by police corruption scandal, DOJ official played key role. Sasha's phone rang incessantly with interview requests. She turned most of them down except for a local station where Cora now served as an investigative reporter. In a measured interview, Sasha highlighted the importance of community courage and cooperation with federal authorities when tackling corruption. Merrick Garland, the Attorney General himself, mentioned the Easton case in a press conference about the DOJ's ongoing commitment to civil rights and justice. Sasha's heart fluttered when she saw it on TV. She realized she'd become part of something larger, a wave of accountability sweeping across law enforcement agencies nationwide. Officer Crenshaw's trial took place 3 months later, drawing massive public attention. Sasha testified, playing the recorded confession in court. The jury's faces were grim as they heard Crenshaw boast about taking bribes and threatening Sasha's family. TJ, the gang member, also testified, granted partial immunity in exchange for his cooperation. The trial lasted 2 weeks, culminating in a guilty verdict on multiple counts: conspiracy, obstruction, extortion. Crenshaw was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. When the judge pronounced sentencing, Sasha felt something in her chest unclench, a final release of tension that had built up over years of watching her father struggle for justice in this very city. Beyond the personal victory, Sasha marveled at the cosmic poetry of it all. The officer who had tried to intimidate her, seeing her as nothing more than a vulnerable black woman, ended up crumbling under the weight of his own hubris. The city that once turned a blind eye to corruption was now forced to face its demons. Justice, though slow, had delivered hard karma. This gripping journey from intimidation to vindication is a reminder that true power lies in perseverance, truth, and the commitment to do what's right no matter how intimidating the odds. Sasha Henderson, thought to be just another face in the crowd, transformed into a catalyst for sweeping change by revealing her hidden position at the Department of Justice. Officer Crenshaw, whose confidence was built on fear and manipulation, learned the hard way that no one is above the law. If you've been inspired by Sasha's courage or felt the thrill of every dramatic twist and turn in this story, please show your support, hit the like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next gripping tale of justice served. Your engagement helps shine a brighter light on stories that need to be told, ensuring justice can continue to prevail.